So trying to play out some of these extreme cases, I think helps you feel like you've been there before. Because that's what pros do, is they've been there again and again. And that's why they can, for the most part, pull the trigger and detach emotionally from what they want to happen.
Oh, those are fair points. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think one of the most fun things about coaching is individualizing like the last minute plans for someone where you say, okay, we're working on theory, we're sharpening your technical skills, but now you're going and you're playing a 3K WSOP event, and I want you to recognize that everyone's just going to peg you as a complete nit. So here's a couple of exploits that should work very well for you. That can be really fun, like creating a battle plan that I can't enact myself, but that certain players can, at least for a short period of time.
I've tried to do that, but I've had limited success with that just because it turns out that people don't like listen as much as you would. The words of logic, the words don't like translate 100% very well to a lot of people. It's very hard for like them to bypass a lot of emotions and like do. I mean, there's some validity to it, but I just find people don't do things. There's just a really, I'm trying to think of a really good way to say it. It's like if someone was to read something in a book and even if it's a good idea, they're not going to put it into their life almost ever just because there's so many emotional barriers going on.
Sure.
It's the same thing with a poker plan. You give someone a poker plan, you say like, "Hey, listen, like everyone thinks you're it. Just run any bluff at all. If you bluff, like there's plenty of people that if they just bluffed like I say this all the time. They just bluff randomly. It would be plus EV, but then they still don't do it, and it's
I like
uh,
that challenge. I kind of view it. I think one of my strengths in coaching, anyway, is recognizing who you can tell something to and they're going to just enact it relatively quickly. I think they wear it on their personality. The people who are just like, great, that's logical. And this guy is an expert and he told me, I'll do it. They tend to be the minority, especially among recreationals. But the majority of players, you do have to build that emotional bridge for them. You have to get them from there to here. You can't just say, look, this is good. They'll agree with you and they'll even think that they're going to enact it. But when push comes to shove and they find themselves in that moment, their nit instinct or lag instinct is going to kick in and they're going to kind of do what they want and follow their feeling. So for those players, I think I'm good at recognizing after I've told them this is a great combo to bluff. You really want to push, even though it looks like no equity on the turn, it ends up being a great follow through on the river. And they say, great, great, I'll do that. And I said, I don't think you will. So we're going to spend the next 10 minutes where I'm going to try and really sell you on it emotionally and try and play out these different hurdles that you're going to encounter in the moment and why I think you're going to talk yourself out of it. And I want you to picture me, with the pitchfork and devil tail on your shoulder being like, go for it. You got to do it.
is that what you actually say? Is that what you
A
actually
fair amount
say?
of that. I don't think the devil pitchfork, but I think the imagery is hopefully there for them.
So how do you? What are some ways that you emotionally coach them into doing it?
I think you have to attempt to recreate it or create it ahead of time. You say, all right, so here's the scenario. I'll give you an example where this actually doesn't have to do with pulling the trigger or not. This is having to do with a friend of mine who didn't have the best work ethic. And when push came to shove, I think he was always going to do a little bit less work than he believed. So once I remember him going on a trip to Borgata for a tournament, and he told me, while I'm there, I'm going to put in at least 50 hours of cash. And I was dubious that that was really going to happen. So I said, I believe that'll happen if prime circumstances play out, but try to play out a world where you get eighth in the tournament. Are you really going to bust eighth in the main event and then just, saunter over to 510 and put in these hours? Probably not. What about if you bubble? Essentially playing out all these different, very reasonable scenarios and seeing how do you think you're going to feel in that moment? Are you actually going to do that? So if we translate that instead to, what we were really talking about, which is pulling the trigger. Let's say for a player who's a nit, not making the bluff. I say, let's try to imagine it's the end of day one. They've announced there's four hands left in the day, and you have six times starting stack, and you're really pumped. You want to bag your 6x starting stack, go to day two, text the family, like, had a great day one, day two's tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. You know, play it out, try and, I'm not sitting here, saying close your eyes and doing a 20-minute imagery session, but doing my best to describe it in a minute or two and saying, you're going to look down at the spot. You're going to say, this is what Jonathan said. I'm supposed to overbet the turn with this combo that I have never conceived of overbetting before. But I have been proven, by whatever solver output that it's a really good bet. And I do trust Jonathan, sort of. But now I just really don't want to end up with 2x starting stack. I don't want to, I don't want to bust and have to play day one again or whatever it is. And so trying to, climb over those hurdles before you find yourself in that spot. That way you feel like you've been there before and that these are not extenuating circumstances that help you talk yourself out of doing that thing that, because you'll always find excuses, I think. So trying to play out some of these extreme cases, I think helps you feel like you've been there before, because that's what pros do is they've been there again and again, and that's why they can, for the most part, pull the trigger and detach emotionally from what they want to happen.
Oh, those are fair points. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I will say that was definitely a lot of what desensitized my emotions for a lot of situations was just getting in a lot of situations to the point where, okay, well, now I know what to do, and and or I can use other situations that are close enough and that kind of thing. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, this is something I want to research a bit more myself, just because if it's kind of the if you can do this for poker, you can possibly do it for a lot of situations where people have emotional hurdles. Um, I mean, that would be a much bigger challenge, but it would be like if you were on tilt, for example, and if you could like sabotage your tilt, that would be really useful. But even beyond that, like if you were like for me, really sleepy, or if you're really um, like I struggle to get up in the morning. If you could find ways to sabotage that, I found like a couple ways to sabotage that actually. Um, or I mean, people have all kinds of emotional problems. Solving emotional problems is worth a lot more money than solving the logical problems, in my opinion, even in poker. And a lot of things that one thing that's really looked over in poker is that people do have to get over their emotional boundaries, and that is a big barrier towards success that isn't really spoken about. Like what you're talking about, like not running the bluff because of this, and that reason. Really, I think that holds more people back than actually like lacking understanding. That's my personal guess. Do you have any insight on
Yeah,
that?
I think people are always talking about doing your best to stay in the moment, and that's really important. But there's a reason that we all struggle. Something is pulling you out of the moment, usually into the future. You're kind of your predictive software is imagining, how am I going to feel if, and that may seem helpful and is probably helpful in other areas of life. I don't think it's just a bug. I think that's probably mostly adaptive and makes us um, better planners than other animals. But when it comes to making the best decision in the moment, in a game, I think that it's mostly harmful. I think because the game just doesn't have these same dire consequences that you can have in other areas of life. The worst thing that happens is you lose your chips or your money. And hopefully, being as present as you can in the moment is going to work towards making the best decision for your money, your chips, what have you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. The more stoic, the better for a poker player. That much we can all agree on. Uh, More robot like. That's why all the Triton guys are robots a lot of the time. No offense. No offense.
No, yeah. As far as decision making, I think that there's a lot of truth to that. But that's you mentioned the book at the onset, and that was kind of a big part of the inspiration for wanting to write this book about the high roller tournament players is I find like personality wise, they're some of the least robotic people and like really funny, entertaining, enjoyable people to be around, that it doesn't translate on TV because when you're streamed, there's a lot of pressure because everyone can see your cards. And much of that time is at a final table where people are making these decisions that are kind of the biggest equity decisions they're going to make for their year and sometimes for their 5 year period. And it's a weird way to kind of judge people's personalities. Like they're not on a reality show. It's not, why am I blanking on the MTV one where everyone lives together, the real world? It's not. It's not a reality show or just meant to be straight entertaining, but realistically, when I started playing some of these high rollers, I was like, what? These guys are nothing like the presentation of them that I think the general public gets. And that was kind of one of the main things I wanted to convey, is that I think it's one of the coolest cultures I've ever been around, is the high roller tournament pros and players in general.